Hello. It's a nice sunny day today, but I'll take these off since I'm talking. And I want to talk about Amanda Tucker. She was Reverend Truhart Tucker's and Judith Tucker's baby daughter. Well, there's a little bit. Some people say that she wasn't. Judith, her sister, was supposed to be the youngest. But there's a little dates, but it's not by that much. That's kind of, they both were young. Anyway, I'm from the Amanda Tucker line. And that's the line that started the black people in Reverend Truhart Tucker's and Judith Tucker's family. They had 8 kids, and I think she was the only one that maybe at the time kind of strayed away. But I think it did kind of cause a little bit of hardship within the family. But that is why I say the Reverend Truhart Tucker was a good man, because when she married John A. Dunning the first time, I think they went a couple of years, and she was about 16 maybe, and I guess maybe even 14. I think that she was born in 1832, but they have some records that show that she was born in 1830. Either way, she was very young. And at that time, women kept house and raised kids. And I think Amanda really didn't have much to do, because John Dunning couldn't have kids. At least all the evidence that I'm looking at is that he couldn't have kids. He never had kids. There's no record of him and Amanda having kids. And the baby that Amanda had was a baby from one of the family slaves. His name was Bob Dunning. And it appears to me that this was arranged. I know that's kind of like far-fetched or whatever, but it's kind of hard, because the negative things that happen in families a lot of times get covered up. But I think that Amanda wanted a baby so bad that they made arrangements for a baby to be born. And Bob Dunning was probably mulatto, because I hear that my grandmother, Ada, her baby that she had, is actually my great-great-grandmother, was passed for white, or was very, very fair. On one of the census, she's listed as mulatto. The first census in 1850, when you find Amanda and Ada living in Reverend Truhart's family. And then on the next census, on the 1860 census, she's living in the household of John A. Dunning and Amanda. And they have her listed as white. Well, they didn't indicate that she was black or mulatto, so when it was left blank, that was indicative, I guess, a code or whatever they want to call it, that the people were white. So, and maybe they just assumed that she was white because Amanda was white and John A. Dunning was white. I don't know, but I'm looking at her as being very fair. So the slave that Amanda mated with probably was not your typical black, dark. So the story goes that Amanda Tucker, one of the youngest, went with a slave to have a baby. She was married to John A. Dunning for a couple of years. And The year for their marriage certificate is 1846. She couldn't have any kids with him because he was sterile. That's what the evidence is pointing at, because they never had kids together for the years that they were married. I think they were married 1846 and he died in 1863. Anyway, I feel the thing, or how it happened, was that she was probably upset, not angry, or maybe distraught. You know how it is when people who can't have kids, the emotions that they go through, maybe the anger that they can't have their own kids. At that time, women took care of the house and they raised the kids. So I can imagine her being married and not have the same responsibilities as other women, that it must have really hurt her. So I feel that since the slave that she went with, or mated with, was the Dunning family slave, he probably was the best choice at the time. And I know this is kind of far-fetched, but it could happen. A lot of negative things that happen in families are covered up forever. No one ever hears about it or knows about it, at least the circumstances. But she went with this Dunning slave. This is, I feel, my opinion, because he was of Dunning blood. I feel that John A. Dunning's father probably was his father. You know, back a long time ago, the slave owners used to mate with their slaves to make more. I guess because it was looked at as a commodity, slaves. And I guess some of the cases they could have loved them, but this was the closest thing to Dunning blood. And on a couple of the censuses, Ada, the baby that they had from Amanda and his slave, is noted as mulatto on a 1850 census, the same year she was born. I think she's like 5 months old. And then 10 years later, when she's 10, in the 1860 census, when she's living again in the household of John A. Dunning and Amanda, because they remarried. I guess I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. But anyway, she's listed as white. So maybe the census taker kind of assumed that since the head of household and the wife was white, that the baby was white, because she looked white too. But she definitely didn't look black. And then from what my father tells me is that she was very fair and she could pass for white. But Amanda and Johnny Dunning was married in 1846. And then I feel, since it was such a religious family, because you remember my grandfather, great-grandfather, but it's 4 greats, Reverend Truhart Tucker, was also a Baptist minister, or reverend. And I think, not saying that he directed it or anything, but I think so that it could be done right in God's eye, that she shouldn't be married whenever this baby was conceived. And so they were divorced. And then there are 2 marriage certificates where he turns around and marries her again, I think like in 1862. But they're living together as husband and wife, and they're raising this baby. So because Reverend Truhart was so powerful in status and wealth, that this was allowed to happen. And that's my take on it. And the reason I say that is because I can imagine at that time the worth of a woman was working in the house and raising kids, that she probably felt really bad, probably even cried, because she was young. She was either 14 years old when she got married, by my account, born in 1832, or 16. Either way, 16 is still young. And little girls play house from the time they're able to walk almost. But I could see her being very distraught. And John A. Dunning loved her enough, or either if he was upset about it, he forgave her enough to marry her again. And I think that the Reverend Truhart Tucker made it happen. Because I know how I am. I know that whenever anything went wrong in my life, first thing popped in my head was Daddy. Daddy could make it happen. I know Mama, or my mommy, as I call her. I know it sounds kind of young, but that's what we call her. Her name Mommy. She would have compassion and empathy. I know she would always probably hurt like any other parent would when their child hurts, and would want to try and fix it. So I feel that her father went along with it because she was hurt so bad. She couldn't, and that's how I feel black people ended up in Truhart Tucker's family. Because like I say, he was a slave owner, his sons were slave owners, but no, offense to them, because that was the thing of the times. History, we can't change it. Black people were a commodity. They helped, and their labor helped with their farms and all this other stuff. But I feel like he still was a good man. They had the bad slave owners and the good slave owners, and I feel that he was a good one with a heart. And that's it for right now. But that's the story of Amanda Tucker, and how Ada, the baby that came from that union, came about, which happened to be my father's great-grandmother and my great-great-grandmother. Alright, that's it. I'll show you the documentations of the marriage certificate, the two of them later on when I get back home. See ya.